Broadcasting from the heart of the nation, the next generation in conservative talk radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Why, yes, it is. What is up, my friends? Hey, it's a Monday. It's the greatest day of the entire week. We are setting that tone for a whole nother one, ready to rock and roll as we go into another week of the Trump administration. Hey, Democrats. You're getting so angry about so many things, but you don't know how to attack them because it's going too quickly. It's kind of funny to watch, so welcome aboard. So great to have you along. It is The Voice of Reason. My name is Andy Hoosier, broadcasting out of the heart of the nation in Wichita, Kansas, on our flagship radio station. But we are all over the country, multiple radio stations and TV, live streaming, podcasting, however you watch or listen to the show.
Do it live!
Welcome aboard, your Millennial General, reporting for duty like we do every single day. What a show we have lined up for you. We'll get to it in just a minute here. First and foremost, I have to thank you and warn you. Over the weekend on our syndicated weekend program, our Voice of Reason weekend episode, I had on Mrs. Voice of Reason, the lovely wife, who also owns her own business known as Hoosier Health. And I have to thank you for one and warn you because we had her on for the first time, kind of introducing Hoosier Health, what she does, being a master herbalist, talking about alternative medicines and ways to like heal yourself with natural herbs and plants. You know, things away from pharmaceuticals, which is...
Say what?
Yeah, I know, kind of a very controversial thing, but nonetheless, we did that. We did a recap on the RFK hearings. There we go. I think we got our video stream up and going now. We were recapping the RFK hearings from last week. We had her on the program and did a quick plug of her website and what she does. There were so many people that tried to order things and reach her website, the website crashed. So, thank you, first off. Thank you for that. She is overwhelmed with the excitement of listeners, which tells me two things. Number one, there are a lot of people that are interested in alternative medicines, which is really awesome. Number two, we have to find a more stable website. So we are working, we are working on rebuilding a website for her that's going to be able to handle what we thought the previous one was going to handle, but didn't. So bear with us on that. That was kind of a shock and awe for us for what happened on the weekend, and we thank you for that support. That is really cool. We'll have more information on it here soon, and I think we'll hear more about Hoosier Health coming up on The Voice of Reason relatively soon. All right, that being said, hopefully you had a great weekend. There's a lot to get to this week as well. Starting off the program on a Monday, Andrew Handel will be on at the bottom of the hour. He's with ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. He is the director for the Education and Workforce Development Task Force. Say that 3 times fast. We're going to talk about ALEC having their rankings for the most free public education systems in the country on a state-by-state basis. It comes in hand as well with last week's school choice executive orders that were passed under the Trump administration or signed, and what public education could look like moving forward. So we'll get to all that and more coming up in just a little bit. That being said, though,
what's trending today?
I want to shift gears and get right into it with our first guest of the hour, which I'm really happy to have on to talk about all of the shenanigans going on in Washington, D.C. As you know, it was a big weekend for the economy and implementation of the 25% tariffs on on Russia. Good Lord, on Mexico and on Canada. We can do this today, I promise. And now apparently at least the one with Mexico has been suspended after the conversation that President Trump has had with the president of Mexico. At the same time, Donald Trump also working to implement his block grant freezing, or his program freeze for a lot of spending for grants across the nation. There was a lot of pushback from that, a lot of legal blockades, and we'll see what the future of that looks like as well. To talk about some of that and so much more, really happy to have on the program. He is a reporter for the White House for the Washington Examiner. Really happy to have on Christian Datoc. Christian, how are you, my friend?
I'm great, Andy. Thanks for having me. And in case, anyone listening over the airwaves right now is wondering why you were getting confused by those countries that President Trump is putting tariffs on, it's because this is changing minute by minute. Since you and I first got on the line on the back end, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that he will actually work with the Trump administration in exchange for a delay on the implementation of those tariffs, like we saw Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum say earlier this morning. So those threats are clearly proving fruitful for the Trump administration. We'll see if they will go into place 30 days down the line. but he's certainly getting what he wants first and foremost up front.
Yeah, and this is exactly why when there was the fear with the stock market was wishy-washy. There were some on the other side of the aisle that said Donald Trump was starting a trade war. This is what he wanted. This is the entire purpose. We put the tariffs in there. They come to the table. We start negotiating, and then we have a better trade deal. We get rid of the tariffs, or we don't even implement them at all. This is nothing more than a negotiation to get better deals for the United States and have better relations at the end of the day. Why is there so much panic and paranoia every time Donald Trump actually lays down the gauntlet and says, this is what we're going to do to make America in a more beneficial position?
There's two items at play, really, Andy. First is obviously the critics of the president are going to be up in arms over just about everything he does. That being said, I mean, traditionally, economists warn tariffs are bad for the economy, especially an economy that's, grappling with just missing out on a recession over the last 4 years with the Biden administration and all of their policies that contributed to inflation across just about every sector. You mentioned the market wishy-washiness. I mean, the Dow and the S&P both did fall around 1.25% on open this morning. Now, of course, that was before Sheinbaum came out and said, there is a delay. We're going to be sending 10,000 troops to the border. And then on top of that, Justin Trudeau, after escalating this quote-unquote trade war with the United States over the weekend, saying he would put 25% tariffs on roughly $155 billion in U.S. goods, he has now turned the page and is spouting a very different tune. To be honest, I'm looking at the top line of his announcement. He's going further than the Mexican government has said they would in terms of working with the Trump administration. They are going to be naming a new fentanyl czar. They're going to stand up a joint task force, or a strike force, rather, to combat the cartels and other organized crime alongside the United States. And like Donald Trump just last week, he's going to be naming the cartels operating inside of Canada as terrorist organizations. So a lot of big updates, but I think when you take a step back and you look at what exactly this messaging strategy or threat strategy, whatever you want to call it, has gained, it's an increased focus not only on immigration, but on the drug trade that is killing, dozens of thousands of Americans every year.
Yeah. So just to sum both of these up, we've had the Mexican government now place 10,000 soldiers on their border trying to battle the cartels, which is, by the way, with how powerful the cartels are in Mexico, that's going to be almost an act of war. We could see a civil war happening relatively soon down there. But it's going to be with the assistance of the U.S. going in and striking out some of these cartels. Now, as you just mentioned, with the Canadian government having their own task force to battle fentanyl and the cartels as well. Tell me how strong negotiating skills have had anything to do with this, right? Because I guarantee you, Christian, I highly doubt that the Biden administration would have been able to negotiate what we just saw over the past, 2 days.
Well, negotiating is one thing, and I do want to push back on you a little bit, because back in 2021, the Mexican government, again, agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border. Honduras and Guatemala both ponied up a combined 7,500 law enforcement officers to, try and stop the flow of northern migration. But ultimately, when you think about Donald Trump as a negotiator, these countries are afraid of him. They don't know if, his threats will stop at the tariffs, or if he might, like he has quite literally threatened, launch an invasion of Mexico to take on the cartels himself. So negotiating is one thing, but I think having sort of the presence on the international stage to back up those threats is a very different strength that, unfortunately, President Biden just did not express over the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's a great point. We're talking with Christian Datoc. He's a White House reporter for the Washington Examiner. Looking out, not just with this issue particularly, but let's zoom out to the 30,000-foot view for just a moment. What Donald Trump has done in the past 2 weeks, 300 executive orders, all these actions, border crossings down like 94% from what we had seen under the Biden administration, the kicking out of many bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., the investigations on DEI, everything that's been happening. Have we ever seen an administration move this quickly on this many issues before, do you think?
We haven't, and to be quite frank, it's not necessarily the scope of what he's doing. I mean, let's be honest, Donald Trump and his allies campaigned on all of these issues. They said they were going to address them. But I do think there were folks here in D.C. who were skeptical that they could, approach addressing all of this with the speed that they have. And this didn't all get done on day one, like Donald Trump said it would. But, we're into the third week now, and he's very quickly working down that checklist of top issues, whether it's trade, whether it's immigration, whether it's, addressing DEI or education systems or trying to shrink the federal bureaucracy. He's hitting on all of those points. And again, it is early days. We have to see this thing through to fruition. Yeah. But they appear to be doing what they told us they would be doing on the campaign trail. And I think the Trump supporters are certainly happy to see a substantive sea change here in D.C.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of a shockwave. I mean, we are getting the shock and awe, but it's almost needed. Like you said, I mean, the reset button that needs to happen in D.C., we're going to see the shock, and it's going to need the private sector to adjust a little bit to understand how things are going to start working from now on. But that's what we need, because if we go too slowly, then nothing ever gets done in Washington, which is what Trump, I think, was scared of at first. And then, of course, we're seeing these legal battles for these block grants, that he wanted to freeze the grants that were going out to different organizations across the nation. The birthright citizen issue that he tried to sign with the executive order. We're going to have to work our way through the courts. Christian, is that a concern, do you think, for some of these issues?
It is not when you ask the Trump team. And I think, on the one hand, Donald Trump sort of relishes in these legal battles. It's been a mainstay of not only his political career, but his business career spanning, the last several decades. But again, I think one thing that the Trump team has in their favor is that they've had the last 4 years to basically come up with a game plan that they can implement, if not on day one, at least in the early infancy of this second administration. So you got folks like Russell Vogt, who's going to be the new OMB director here shortly once his confirmation moves its way through the Senate. All of these plans and ways that they're trying to address the issues that Trump has been talking about over the last 4 years, they're ready to go. They had legal scholars prepare, mechanics of implementing this vehicle, and they are very confident that even if there are a number of prolonged pitched battles in the court system, they'll ultimately end up on top.
Yeah, it's a great point. Christian, we got just about a minute left here, and I appreciate your time very much. Looking out, and this is just pure speculation, obviously, but looking at the future of Washington, D.C., with what we could see with this fourth branch of government, this bureaucratic state that we've had for so long, and what these new cabinet members that want to work with Trump are planning on doing, could we see, do you think, an entirely different Washington, D.C. moving forward, and not just under Trump, but for the long haul moving forward?
I mean, I would argue that we've already seen a very different D.C. in play, not only during the first, days and weeks of the Trump administration, but under President Joe Biden. I think just the way that Donald Trump worked in the first term, it had people inside D.C. thinking about these issues through the lens of people in communities across the country. And ultimately, that's the way government should operate. It shouldn't be this insulated beltway bubble. We should be thinking about the wants and needs of communities all across the country. And I don't think D.C. will ever go back to the way it was before Trump walked into the Oval Office during his first term.
I hope so. I'm optimistic. We can see this fourth branch of government go away, or at least be extremely dwindled, which we did see a report that the Environmental Protection Agency apparently is warning their employees that they could be seeing roughly 1,000 of them be fired relatively soon with the cutting of the size of the EPA along with their regulations. Christian Datoc, White House reporter for the Washington Examiner. We appreciate the time very much, my friend. Keep up this fight. I know it's crazy trying to follow as much of this as possible. Got to get you back on the show again real soon, my friend.
Thanks, Andy. Take care.
Hey, you bet. Likewise. We'll get you back on again. Christian Datoc, White House reporter, Washington Examiner. So much information that we have to try and cover and watch what's going on. My head hurts out of Washington. We'll do some more of that when we come back around the corner. It's a Monday for The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. When reason meets radio. This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
And we can now report Mexico and Canada are leaning into Trump's art of the deal. The president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, spoke to Trump and is saying she will send 10,000 Mexican military to their side of the southern border. That's meant to assist with the border crisis left behind by the Biden-Harris administration. Trump says they agreed to pause any tariffs for 30 days. I'm Harris Faulkner.
There it is. So that audio from Fox News. So the winning just keeps on. Are you tired of winning yet? I mean, no, we're not tired of winning yet. We are ready to celebrate. That's what we do. So I want to read you two different posts. Now, again, I'm just to put this into perspective, the tariffs officially went into effect on Saturday. The 25% tariff on Canada, the 25% tariff on Mexico. It wasn't a full business day. Business day, meaning by Sunday they were panicking. By Monday morning, we had conversations with both of them. Trump has officially suspended the tariffs on both of these nations for 1 month as they continue to get their you-know-what's in order and begin working with the Trump administration closer, making trade deals better, and sealing off the borders for cartels and for fentanyl. They did less than a business day. We were able to make it work.
We did it! We did it! We did it! Yay!
So, all right. So first off, here's earlier today when Donald Trump had his phone conversation with the president of Mexico. He made this post on Truth Social. I just spoke with the president of Mexico. It was a very friendly conversation wherein she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants to our country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for a 1 month period during which we will have negotiations headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, a high-level representatives of Mexico. I look forward to participating in these negotiations with President Sheinbaum as we attempt to achieve a deal between our two countries. That was Mexico earlier today. Now, as we just mentioned, the story that happened within the last 20 minutes on this big story.
What's trending today?
That the deal has officially been made with Canada as well. This post from Truth Social, and this was as of about 20 minutes ago. Canada has agreed to ensure that we have a secure northern border and to finally end the deadly scourge of drugs like fentanyl that have been pouring into our country, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans while destroying their families and communities all across our nation. Canada will implement their $1.3 billion border plan, and as per Prime Minister Trudeau, we will, quote, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working to protect the border. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force, and combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I have also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be backing it with $200 million. He finishes off saying, as president, it is my responsibility to ensure the safety of all Americans, and I am doing just that. I am very pleased with the initial outcome, and the tariffs announced on Saturday will be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured. Fairness for all. I would like to remind you again, within less than one business day, this has been implemented. Name one time when the Biden administration was able to talk tough, actually negotiate, and get another country to do something like this. Now, the panic, the hysteria from the other side that says that we were just going to start Trump trade war and prices were going to skyrocket.
We're all gonna die because of you!
That went to the wayside. The tariffs have been suspended. Why? Because Donald Trump was able to get what he needed, securing the border, making sure fentanyl's not going to cross, and actually declaring war on these cartels. And you know what? We will be there to assist these nations in the battle against the cartels, to eliminate these cartels as the terrorist organizations that they are. But we had to just kind of nudge them in the right direction. And while they tried to do the same to us with a trade war, they saw how minuscule that is and how irrelevant it was and how powerful the United States really is, and they need us more than we need them.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. Truth, reason, and common sense. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. We give them protection, military protection. We don't need them to build our cars. I'd rather see Detroit or South Carolina or any one of our Tennessee, any one of our states build the cars. They could do it very easily. We don't need them for the cars. We don't need them for lumber. We don't need them for anything. We don't need them for energy. We have more energy than they do. We don't need them for energy. So I say, why are we doing this? Why are we willing to lose between $100 billion and $200 billion a year? We don't need them. As a state, it's different.
I love it. The total trolling that Donald Trump does. The trolling against Canada being the 51st state. Governor Trudeau apparently just making that deal with the Trump administration, freezing the tariffs for 30 days in order for them to put this task force together and start monitoring the border against cartels and the flow of fentanyl. That is a big victory, my friends. So pat yourself on the back and celebrate that one. Have no fear. We got you covered. The Voice of Reason is here. And by the way, there is some breaking news going on right now.
What's trending today?
Before we get to our guests here momentarily, there is some breaking news according to the Post-Millennial on Truth Social. They've shared a link officially that as we look at the confirmations that are just lingering out there in the Senate for cabinet picks from the Trump admin, we have multiple hearings that happened last week, and we're just sitting on some of these confirmation votes. We don't know what's going on. Apparently, there's some support for Tulsi Gabbard to be Director for National Intelligence, and it's coming from a place that, gotta be honest, didn't quite imagine, but Senator Susan Collins, the Republican that despises Donald Trump and pretty much fights against him as a near Democrat already. Anyways, according to her, she said that she will be voting to confirm Tulsi Gabbard to be Director for National Intelligence, saying, quote, "I look forward to working with Ms. Gabbard to strengthen our national security."
Say what?
I know. What does that mean? If she's going to vote for him, that should be a pretty easy case for her, for Tulsi to be passed through the confirmation process, both in the committee and in the full Senate floor. So looking forward to those happening, hopefully sooner than later.
What's trending today?
All right, let's shift gears just a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on, but last week wrapped up with National School Choice Week with some major announcements from the Trump administration on school choice by signing an executive order creating national school choice, along with getting rid of propaganda that is anti-American, banning that, a lot of the wokeness out of our public education curriculum, also bringing a lot of the funding from the federal government down to the statewide levels to allow states to have a better influence on the public education system overall. Where do we stand on public education now, not only with the curriculum, with quality of it, but also with freedom of education? Andy, what do you mean by that? Well, how much rights that parents actually have, because you know that in some school districts, apparently if a parent goes up to the school board and asks questions, then you're a domestic terrorist, and we're not allowed to do that. So, that being said, where are we at on the rankings of freedom for the parental empowerment and for the public education around the nation? ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, comes out with their yearly review on that and has officially released the Index of State Education Freedom, a 50-state guide to parental empowerment. Really happy to have on the program to talk about that the director of the Education and Workforce Development Task Force with ALEC, Andrew Handel. Andrew, Happy New Year to you. Good to have you back on the program.
Happy New Year to you as well. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, what a wild time. It has been a whirlwind of news that we just try to just barely keep up with and watch what's going on. But this is good news, isn't it? Bringing the power back to the states, starting school choice, and with the battle that we've seen and what you guys have monitored, is this going to help, do you think, the empowerment of parents and the empowerment of local school boards for the public education system?
Yeah, it's absolutely going to help. Over the past couple of years, we've seen states, passing a lot of different laws and programs, all trying to do the same thing, which is put power back in the hands of parents and let them pick the best school for their kids, whether that's your local public school, whether it's a public school outside of your district, whether it's a private school, homeschool, virtual school, micro school. I could keep going on, but all of these are great options, and every kid has their own unique learning needs, right? So It's, super important that parents are empowered, and we were thrilled to see President Trump last week sign that executive order that you mentioned, directing a couple of different cabinet secretaries to identify funding and programs that they can use to prioritize education freedom. So super excited to see that.
That is exciting. Yeah. And of course, the president for ALEC this year, Jonathan Williams, we've had him on the show many times before as well, met with President Trump last week during School Choice Week when he was discussing education issues. What came out of that conversation? Because I'm assuming that, obviously at that time, Trump was really involved in wanting to figure out what to do best and next for the process of education. But what was that meeting all about?
Yeah, it was fantastic. So as you mentioned, last week was National School Choice Week, and we were thrilled. President Trump extended an invitation to ALEC's president, Jonathan Williams, to attend a school choice roundtable. And so Jonathan was there along with a couple of other national leaders, governors,
various folks who are big in the education freedom space. And yeah, it was just a great discussion all around. The president had a lot of really good questions, but really his main focus is on returning education back to the states. He said that on the campaign trail, and he's putting those words into action now. So it was a really good gathering to go through and discuss. Here are the different things that can be done at the federal level through the Department of Education and other programs and departments to make sure that states are the ones deciding what the best policies in education are for them.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about the rankings that you guys have, because you come out with this every year. First, before we talk about the top ones and the worst ones, was there a lot of movement year over year when you guys start studying this and look at parental empowerment and school choice and the ability for us to have the best education possible? Is there a lot of shifting on a year-to-year basis? Because, here in Kansas, we at least got some open enrollment compared to, what we had last year. So we've seen a little bit of change in education, at least where I'm from. I'm sure other states have been battling this as well. But how does this one this year differ from the last ones that you guys have done?
Yeah. So, just broadly, when we come out with these rankings, we look at 5 categories that we think are broadly representative of a state's education freedom. The first is funding programs. So that might include things like education scholarship accounts, tax credit scholarships, anything that allows funding to follow students to the best school that for their needs. The second category that we look at is charter schools. Then we look at home schools, virtual schools, and open enrollment, which you just mentioned as well. So we look at those 5 categories, and then we combine them all together to create a composite score at the end, and that's how we end up with the total rankings. And to your question as well on movement, we do see a ton of movement in this year to year. And, I think that's because really since COVID, states have been pursuing, no longer are states pursuing small programs in education freedom. They're going big. They're making sure that every single kid in the state, regardless of their situation, their household income, special needs, whatever it might be, they're making sure every single kid is able to participate in these programs. So super exciting. And yeah, we've seen a ton of movement.
That's exciting. That's really good to hear. So let's talk about some of these rankings. What were maybe some of the top 5 that we saw ranked on this list for the best schools in the country?
Yeah, so number 1 was Florida, which, probably doesn't surprise too many people. Florida being number 1, they've got, tons and tons of great programs in that state. Across all 5 categories, they were really the only state to score well across all 5. So therefore, they were the only state to get an A+ in this year's rankings.
Wow.
Number 2 was Arizona, 3 was Arkansas, 4 was Oklahoma, and 5 was Iowa. So, not a coincidence that those 5 are up there at the top. All of them have a universal education freedom program. So, and actually, every single one of those states, they passed those programs within the past 2 to 3 years. So, super, super exciting to see.
That is very exciting. Living in Kansas, we hear a lot about what's going on down in Oklahoma. They've had some interesting drama with their statewide superintendent, Ryan Walters, but it's been interesting to watch how their education system's been unfolding. It's good to hear, though, that they are at the top of the list with some of the with their quality of education, with some of the freedoms they have, which just shows that, the activism that parents have, I think, at local levels really is having an impact all over the country.
Yeah. The involvement from parents has been huge. Here at ALEC, we're the largest nonpartisan membership organization with state lawmakers and private sector members. And when I go around and talk to state lawmakers, regardless of the state, they all tell me the same thing, which is that parents are showing up at these hearings now and explaining how these potential programs are going to benefit their kids. And that's really the most powerful driver, right? You go in front of an education committee, they're debating a big school choice program, and, them hearing those personal stories from those families is ultimately, what is driving this in every single state. So, yeah, the involvement from parents has been huge, and that's led to a lot of the successes that we've seen.
What do you think was the spark for so many parents to start doing this more so than what they had done before? Was it COVID-19, which I think started some of it with the masks and maybe the vaccines for kids or whatever, but was it also maybe, the 1619 project, some of these other, parts of the curriculum that was a concern? We heard about it, those kind of things prior to COVID. but I didn't hear about the type of activism that we're hearing about now, with us wanting to show up to school board meetings, with even school boards telling us that we're domestic terrorists and getting on the FBI list to investigate us because we showed up. Was COVID really the kind of the trigger and the catalyst for a lot of this change?
Yeah, COVID was definitely the trigger. I think all of these public schools shifting onto Zoom, and that gave parents an inside look at what their kids were being taught. And I always say, sometimes they saw material that certainly was questionable. Whether that was the 1619 Project or anything else along those lines. Some parents just felt like their kids weren't being challenged enough. They felt like their kid needed a bigger push. Every parent, every kid is in their own unique circumstance, and the simplest way to put it is there's no such thing as a single school that's going to be the best fit for every kid.
Right.
So that's why we have to have all of these different options available to families, and that's why it's so important that funding follows those students to whatever school is best for them. We shouldn't just be trapping them in a public school that doesn't work for them, for no reason, essentially.
Exactly. That's a great point. Andrew, hang on the line. We got to take a hard break here. It's Andrew Handel, Director of the Education and Workforce Development Task Force with ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. When we come back, I want to talk about the future of education and, with all these changes, what we could see moving forward. Lots more coming up for a Monday. Stay here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. America's safe space for common sense. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
So on this next ballot, you will be able to vote for 2 candidates of any gender on the next ballot. If
What?
2 candidates receive...
What? What?
I'm going to turn to Helen to clarify this last part.
Yeah, you can just clarify that. We don't know what we're voting on. All right. By the way, that was the DNC convention that went on over the weekend. So if you missed it, what's his name? Tim Martin, I believe. He is the chair of the Democrat Party for the state of Minnesota. He has been elected to be the new chair for the national DNC. David Hogg, the anti-gunner, anti-Second Amendment child advocate, has been voted on as the vice chair of the DNC. Yeah. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Apparently, they're only going to be a one-issue candidate now, or one-issue party, and they're looking desperately for the new generation, and swing and a miss, my friends. But whatever. That's cool. They can self-implode on that front, but now you can vote on numerous genders on the next ballot. I don't know exactly what that means. Thank God that we're going to start seeing that go to the wayside from our public education system. We're hanging out right now with Andrew Handel, the Director for the Education and Workforce Development Task Force with ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. Say that 3 times fast as we look at the education rankings across the nation. Andrew, we talked about the top states in the nation. Let's go to the other flip of the coin. Let's talk about some of the worst states in the nation. And I'm wondering if there's a correlation of how they run their state's education system and the lack of freedoms, the lack of test scores, the lack of graduation rates that we're seeing. But from what you guys found with ALEC, what's on the bottom of the totem pole here?
Yeah. So at the bottom, number 50, dead last, was New York, which probably doesn't surprise too many people. But New York was the only state there. I mentioned earlier, we looked at 5 different categories to measure education freedom, and New York was the only state to score a big fat 0 in 4 out of the 5. So, wow. So easily number 50 for New York.
But they spend so much money on it, Andrew. They spend so much money on education that you'd think it would be the best.
Exactly. I always like to say it's not about how much you spend; it's about how you spend it. States like Florida spend it much more efficiently on these school choice programs and empowering parents, and that's the way to go. That's what's going to boost student achievement. So
I try to tell my wife that it's not how much money I make; it's how we spend it. But she didn't go for that one. I don't know why.
Exactly. So yeah, rounding out the bottom 5, number 49 was Massachusetts, 48 was Oregon, 47 was Rhode Island, and 46, probably a little bit of a surprise for some people, was Kentucky. Kentucky actually had one of the biggest drops in this year's rankings. They fell 16 points or 16 spots. That was due to the fact that the legislature previously had passed a education scholarship account program that some families were using. Unfortunately, the state Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional and voided the program. So that's the reason for that drop there.
That's interesting. How many states do you know now? Is it still a main topic, do you think? We're going into, obviously, we're in the middle of state legislative session across the nation, each individual state government working on their issues. Is school choice, open enrollment, better education, is that top priority, do you think, for most of these states right now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely top priority for a number of these states. Actually, just this year already, we just had Tennessee last week. During National School Choice Week, passed a brand new universal education scholarship account program. So, wow. Governor Lee made that his signature priority, and the legislature quickly acted. I mean, he declared a special session saying that they were going to do this, and within 3 days, the legislature got it passed. So
that's amazing.
That was pretty cool to see. But yeah, we're seeing this in other states too. Wyoming is pursuing a massive program. South Carolina is. Texas as well. Governor Abbott, also made this a big priority, and right now it looks like there's enough support to get a pretty significant program passed there too. So, yeah, in all of these states, we're seeing a really big push, and in a number of them too, the governors are a big reason why there's such a big push. These governors are prioritizing this as their number one issue.
That's exciting. Andrew, we got just about 30 seconds left as we wrap things up here. Do you expect to see a complete decimation of a federal Department of Education, or is it just going to be reformed a little bit in a different manner?
We'll see. I know those conversations are going on right now. President Trump definitely has a big vision for it, and he said he's going to abolish it. But really the biggest thing is getting power back in the hands of the states and getting power back in the hands of parents. So we're really excited to see that happening. Yeah,
I can't wait to see it. Thomas Massie, Congressman, he's officially presented the bill in the House to completely abolish the Department of Education. We'll see how far that goes. Andrew Handel, Director of the Education and Workforce Development Task Force for ALEC. We appreciate the time very much, my friend. Congrats on the new study. Let's get you back on and talk some more about it real soon here.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, you betcha. Always a pleasure. There it is. We'll talk some more about that tomorrow. Education front and center. So much going on and so much winning on that front. Let's see some better grades and some graduation rates. Until then, back at it again tomorrow. This is The Voice of Reason. I'm Andy Hoosier. We'll see you on the radio. Bye.